Well, good afternoon, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm your host, Danielle Richardson. And I am really, excited and honored today to be speaking with Brian Cox. He's a very famous Shakespearean actor, but he's also been in several films like Braveheart, as well as Churchill, The Boxer, Troy. Um, but he trained first as a Shakespearean actor, and even now is preparing for a play in which he plays Bach. Um, and he's an author, he's done radio, audiobooks. When I was looking for all the things he's done, it's a very versatile actor. Um, but he also recently was the voice of Helm Hammerhead in The War of the Rohirrim, which is another one of the films that I got to hear his voice in. And I do recommend that you check out that film, as I found it to be very honoring to the Lord of the Rings and to the spirit of the books as well as the earlier films. But Brian, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
You're welcome, Daniel. You're much welcome. Yeah.
Well, I wanted, Brian, I wanted to ask you about the Shakespearean because that for me, I know in the States as well as the time that I've visited the UK, I've seen several Shakespearean productions, and a good Shakespearean production is kind of hard to find, honestly, but I love when I do find one and it's very um, touching to the heart. I wanted to ask you, is there a role in particular that you found most challenging because it was very much unlike who you are as a person?
Well, I suppose the role that I probably had the greatest success in, and we've still, well, not just me, but the director, Deborah Warner. And it's a play that everybody was like that about, which is Titus Andronicus. And I did Titus Andronicus in the 80s. And quite honestly, I think we knocked it out of the park. And it's been, we set a standard which is very, hasn't been quite met since in nearly 40 years. And it's just an amazing play. It's a tough play because it has all grief. It has so much of, there's so many ideas that he, it was a very interesting period. It was about 1593 that he wrote that. And he also wrote Richard III at the same time. And these were plays that he kind of gets his rocks off on, these plays, particularly with Richard. He makes this kind of extraordinary demonic force. But this was Shakespeare trying out a lot of his ideas, and trying out very successfully. So there's so many of the plays that appear like Hamlet. There's bits of Hamlet, there's bits of Othello, there's bits of every play that you can imagine. But there's a central scene which is unique, which is a scene after his daughter's raped, where it's a quartet. It's a small quartet, but it's one of the most beautiful scenes in Shakespeare.
And did you find, was that the most difficult for you to do, or?
No, it wasn't really. Because I was able to do it the way I felt it should be done, and also in agreement with my director, Deborah Warner. And I think that I think we really got the play because we honored the play, but there's so much craziness in the play. He pretends to be mad. He does what Hamlet does. It's an extraordinary play. And then, of course, at the end, he bakes the two boys into a pie and feeds them to their mother. So it's really dark in that way. It's like it's like an absurdist play when it gets into that. But it's quite amazing. It's quite incredible.
Yeah. What role do you think was the hardest for you to play, like the most challenging?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, I've played so many roles which are pretty challenging, but in the end, and I don't know. It's really I just played so much. I can't think of the part that was most challenging, apart from maybe Bach at the moment, because I'm not musical, so I've got to pretend that I can play cantatas and fugues and all of that.
Are you gonna actually be playing them, or someone else will be doing it in the background?
We will do it together with somebody, but yeah, I will be doing it roughly, but only roughly.
Is there a part you played that's very much unlike you? Like your personality that when you played this other person, I mean, they were just totally different than you
Well,
were.
I mean, somebody like Logan Roy is entirely different to me. I mean, it's just a different animal. I mean, in Succession, it's a completely different animal for me. He's very right wing. He inhabits, but he's also there is something quite vulnerable about him. There's something quite, about Logan that his background and how he comes to where he is and how he holds on to what he is. And his children, which are a huge disappointment to him. And that's always a source of great pain for anybody. But so Logan is very not like me at all. I don't have that kind of, I can be rough, but I'm not that rough.
What do you think your personality is like if you had to describe it?
I don't know. I'm open. I'm open. I'm. I don't. I don't deal with a lot of bullshit. I can't stand it. I mean, I'm not. I'm not enamored of the current American president. I find him rather horrendous, and I cannot understand why the American people have voted for him. I mean, I've also voted, but I didn't vote for him. And and I also find American politics that I really worry about women. I think women are treated so badly. We've had Kamala Harris and we've had Hillary Clinton, and they didn't get a look in. And I really worries me. And then, of course, all the decisions that have been made on women's rights, the whole thing of the abortion issues, all of that, which and that's it's all run by a patriarchy, particularly with the present president. I mean, it's going to be disastrous. It's going to be absolutely disastrous because he has no idea and he has no respect for women because he's he's a felon. We've seen, from his things. And I find it odd that people like some people from the Catholic Church have backed him up. I find it extraordinary. I think America's gone mad, actually, honestly.
Do you think, when you're talking about patriarchy, do you think that's something that's just an American problem, or do you see that
Uh,
worldwide, or
it is worldwide, but it's particularly bad in America. It really is. It's very patriarchal, and I mean he is the epitome of the kind of the
how would you describe when you think of women being more oppressed? I know you mentioned the more political side of it, which is obviously, certain presidential figures and also political issues. Is there other ways you think that the world could do better, or even America specifically, in including women or helping them?
no, absolutely. But I mean, women should just be allowed to be what they can be. I think a matriarchy would be infinitely more healthy than a patriarchy, because mothers are caring and loving. Patriots are a little bit patriarchs are a little bit more, um, and they can be cruder in a way. Whereas the delicacy of women is what's great, and their delicacy of their understanding. And I find the fact that the brutalization that's gone on is just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And particularly under this presidency. Women are in for a really rough time in America, really rough time. And they've got to come together as a force. We need a matriarchal force from American women who just suddenly said, listen, enough is enough. We are treated so badly. And we need that. At the moment, they're a bit too docile,
Yeah.
about what's happening to them.
When did you start forming that opinion that the world would be better off if it was more matriarchal?
Well, I was brought up, as my mom. My dad died when I was 8. My mom had a series of nervous breakdowns. She wasn't well, but I had these amazing sisters, and they were like incredible, and they were, they're much older than me. I mean, my older sister passed away last year at the age of 92. She was 17 years older than me. So I just think, I think the whole patriarchal thing has failed miserably, and it's the same old, and we've got to break it. It's got to be broken if we're going to progress. If not, we're just going down a pretty horrendous road.
Yeah. What what were your sisters like? when you're talking about how they raised you,
They were
what
very good.
did
Well, my dad died when I was 8, and my mum had a series of nervous breakdowns, and then she had to go into a hospital for nervous diseases, and they gave her electric shock treatment, which
oh
destroyed
wow.
quite a lot of her memory and what have you. But my other sisters, my sisters were there. And in fact, my sisters were so generous to a fault that my youngest sister, I mean, youngest, I mean by the youngest, not my youngest, because I was the youngest, but my youngest sister, like my mother emigrated to Canada when she was a kid, when she was quite young. She worked in the service, then came, fortunately or unfortunately, she had met my father, so she came home to. And she was always a little bit questionable about that she actually came home and married she loved my father, don't get me wrong, but she was on something. So my younger sister, she was going to Canada as well. She went to Canada, and my two elder sisters, because it was so difficult, the fact that my father had died, my mother was ill, and there was me. But my older sisters, they made it possible for my youngest sister to go to Canada and have a life.
Like by working for her to have money to go, or
Well, no, just by being, so she didn't have to worry about me, because
oh,
because she was the youngest and she was unmarried, and it would be just wrong if she had to be harnessed with me. And my sisters were wonderful because they looked out for me. And actually, to be honest with you, and I've said this before, time and time again, I never felt any of the horror that people have associated with that whole period of my life. I never felt it. I just said, I think kids are amazing because they learn to adjust rather brilliantly. They kind of just decide they're moving on and they move on in a way. Children don't, they're much more smarter and much more intuitive than we give them credit for.
yeah. Did you, um, what's your fondest memory of growing up with your sisters? Was there something they would do with you that you
Well,
really?
the fact they introduced me, I used to play with the records, which drove them nuts, and that's how I learned to read. I learned to read because I could associate the music with the words on the record sleeves.
Oh
Oh,
wow.
this is Frank Sinatra. I kind of knew that, and that's how I learned to read. But my sisters were because I was naughty. I would get all the records out, and they were the old, they were the original Bakelite records, the ones that broke very easily. So I had to be very careful, but I was fine with it. Yeah.
Like and you're talking about play, you didn't mean break them. You would just listen to them.
Play. No, I'd just play. I would be listening
Okay.
to and I would work them all out. That's Vaughan Monroe, that's Frank Sinatra, that's Nat King Cole, and I knew who they all were, and I could work Nat King Cole. So I literally learned to read through the records.
That's interesting that you're not musical though, if you listen to a lot of music.
No, I'm musical, but I'm not. Because I've focused on the dramatic arts and focused on being an actor from a very early age. I never really got involved, and I slightly regret it that I'm not as musical as I was. But then again, my ma took me. I mean, I did have piano lessons, but unfortunately, my mum got ill, so I never was able to continue with those piano lessons.
So did she end up passing away? Like you never were able to see her again, kind of
No, no,
thing?
no, no,
She.
no, no. She didn't pass away until I was in my 20s, and but
Okay.
she didn't take care of herself. She actually, interesting enough, she always, we were Catholic, and she always wanted to be cremated. And it's fine now, people get cremated all the time, but there was in the Catholic Church, you didn't cremate at one point. You didn't do that. In fact, because I'd done a lot of documentaries about history, I realize, and most archaeologists are saying they really worry now about cremation because people just get obliterated. Whereas
Hmm.
if you've got a set of bones and a thing, you can, it's much more. I've seen a lot of documentaries where they find 12-year-old girls. I did a thing on Saudi Arabia, and this was from the Nabatean Empire, and there was a thing of a girl, and it was 4,000 years old, but they were able to tell so much from that one body.
Right.
And I think we shoot ourselves in the foot by literally turning ourselves to ashes.
But she wanted to be cremated, and was she,
She
or?
wanted, well, that was the point. She wanted to be cremated, and she would never have been cremated if she died at home.
Oh,
So she
okay.
took us. She went to Canada. Not Canada. So she went to Los Angeles actually to see my sister. And my sister lived in her partner lived in this very in what's the place called? It begins with a V. I can't remember. It's near Sierra Madre. Do you know LA at all?
Not very well.
No, it's where are you?
I'm in actually near DC, so I'm
All
on
right.
the all other way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I live. My house is in. I'm talking from London, but my house is in New York. I have a house in New York. Yeah, and I think that's yeah, yeah. It's my mum went and she died, and at that time we couldn't afford to bring her body back, so she got away. She got cremated. She had a heart attack and died. That was in the early 70s, and I was in my 20s.
Did that, since you didn't, did you have really much of a relationship with her, or didn't it
Oh
didn't you?
yeah, I had a very strong relationship with her because I was it was just me and her at one point, and she was quite ill. She was quite she had went through a lot of pain and trouble, and I think she had a lot of guilt about my dad. I don't think she felt she was supportive enough to him. But she was very critical of him in a good way, because my father was over generous to a fault. But
Hmm.
my mother, her great cry was, just remember, Brian, charity begins at home. And it's very interesting because it's had a kind of funny effect on me, because we really did get very poor. I mean, very having, when my dad died, he had pancreatic cancer, and he died within 3 weeks of his diagnosis, and he was only 51.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, and yeah, so that was so one was, you know that grief happened at that time, and I lived through it. But it didn't. I was, of course, sad about my dad, and also sad about my mom. But somehow my survival instinct kicked in. I was just going to
Yeah.
survive all that,
Yeah.
and so I just thought I didn't. I just thought, well, it's just a challenge that you have to overcome.
Now, were you alone with her after she got out of the mental hospital, or
Oh
was
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. I was
Okay.
in. It was a. It wasn't a mental hospital. It was a hospital for nervous diseases, actually. There was a
Okay.
yeah, that was what it was. That's what she was, and that's why she had electric shock treatment. That was to try and cure her of her pain, really, more than anything else. But the trouble is that she lost a lot of her memory as well, because that's what electric shock treatment does.
Okay, so when you're talking about nerve, it's not like mental illness, it's more actual
No,
nerve pain.
no, it's the fact
Okay.
that her whole nervous system collapsed. It just broke down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you, um, was there a particular aspect of her breakdown that you found sad that you remember very vividly as a kid?
Well, I found it initially sad, but also she was also very funny in, in her craziness. She was very funny and quite eccentric, and actually, great sense of humor. I mean, all of that. I mean, she always had that, but and my father's illness and dealing with that, and she herself had been ill too. I mean, she got quite ill after I was born. The thing is, I always remember my image of my mother was always in a red dressing gown that she just wore, because I think she was quite exhausted. And I think the difference between my father was that my father was giving, giving, giving. And my mum just said, we got to start here, not start there. It's a very interesting debate between the two of them. But my father he was tough about it. He just said, no, if I can afford to help people, I will help people. And he did, to his detriment. So when he died, I mean, he had made quite a bit of money because he was a grocer. He was what was known as a received occupation. So he did quite well as a grocer. He was also a special policeman during the war. So he did really well, and that was the thing. He was quite all well off, and therefore he gave a lot of his pals he set them up in businesses. But when he died, he only had £10 in the bank. And that was a hell of a shock. Big shock to my
That's
mom.
that's kind of, I mean, I would feel like that would be irresponsible in a way, because then what did you have as a family?
Well, he was on the he was about to open a new shop. I mean, the point was he died within 3 weeks of his diagnosis, so it was probably a bridging time that he was going through. He
I
wouldn't have been
see.
stuck. He wouldn't have been stuck like that. But how was he to know that he was going to not live? He didn't know that, and he was, as I say, he was 51. He was young, and he was only
Now,
just 51.
did your mom start working right when he passed away, or?
No, no, she couldn't. She couldn't. She was not well at all. She couldn't work. She didn't work until after she came out of the hospital and then came back to the house and started to get a widow's pension. And then she worked as a cleaner and stuff. But she never, you see, she hadn't worked. Oh God, because she never worked. She started in the shop, because my dad was a mill worker. We were jute mills, and my mum was a spinner originally. It was that was the trade in my hometown. And he's just, my mum kind of was, she did well. She ran the shop, and then she was a mother and she was a family maker. So she didn't work. And she
Right.
didn't really work until my dad passed away. And then she had to work when she came back because we had nothing. We were so poor.
So was it your sisters who worked then while your parents?
Well, my sisters were married. They had their own family. They got married quite young.
Okay.
So they were off and, with their own families. My elder sister, Betty, had two boys and subsequently a girl, my niece, Jan. And then my other sister May had two girls. So they had their own family. She also lived not in Scotland. She lived in Chester in England.
So who took care of you then?
Nobody.
You were by yourself in the house?
Quite a lot of the time. But my sisters would make sure I was okay. But I spent a lot of time on my own, and I loved it. I
What
absolutely.
did you do? What was it? What did a day look like in your life when you're by
I
yourself?
was at school. I'd come home. I'd go to the cinema. I would break into the cinema. I was a great one for breaking into the cinema and seeing films. So I got them all for nothing. So I didn't have to spend anything. And in my hometown in the 1950s, there was 21 cinemas. Which was
Wow.
pretty amazing for a small town. And also in the cinemas, you had they changed the programs. It would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, double features. It wasn't single feature; it was double features. Two, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I had two cinemas. I had the Broadway and the Royal, and the Broadway would play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, double features, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, double features. So you got, they would play as many as 4 films a week.
I'm
Well,
surprised you still went to school. I would think you'd just skip.
no, no, I couldn't skip. I was too young. I mean, I was only 7 or 8. I was only 8 when my dad died, so I couldn't skip school. But my school never served me at all. I knew what I wanted to do, and I just, it never served me. You know.
Yeah, how did you, is it because of watching so many movies that you wanted to be an actor? Or,
Well, we in Scotland we do a thing called in New Year we do a thing called Hogmanay, and Hogmanay is a celebration. It's an old primitive celebration of the new year. And the new year, when you go to somebody's house, you take a piece of coal and maybe a little bit of whiskey, and you bring, and you're supposed to have dark hair and blue eyes. That's the idea. And because before I got white, I had dark hair and blue eyes. So I would do first footing. That's what we call first footing. And my dad used to have these parties, huge parties with people, in our tiny flat, sometimes used to be 60 people there a new year. And I would be brought out at 1 o'clock in the morning, because it was my bed alcove with my brother. We slept in the kitchen, in this bed alcove, but we had all these guests, so I had to get out, and my brother to get out. So my brother used to disappear somewhere. He was an extraordinary fellow, my brother, and I would then go. I would go into my mom's bedroom and with my dad's bedroom, and they would be up cooking and so, and I'd sleep there. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd be brought out, and I was my sister was a wonderful singer. She has a great singing voice, and I would be brought out, and I would do my turn, what they called your turn, and everybody. That's what we all kind of entertain one another. It was something that was part of the culture. But I would do really my turn was to do Al Jolson impersonations as a 3-year-old,
Oh my goodness.
So I would get on our bunker where we kept the coal, which was my first stage, and the curtains, and I would get up and then Brian, he would introduce me, and I'd sing. So and the thing that I got was, and it's a thing that I love about the theatre, and also church has the same feeling, is the collective consciousness of an audience when they come together for one event. They're so focused, and there's such a kind of calmness in the room, which I absolutely love. So I thought, this is, and as a 3-year-old, I got this vision of what was going on. I thought, I want to be part of that. Whatever creates that.
Hmm.
And then, of course, because I was a natural show off, I gravitated towards acting.
Was there ever a time when you showed off and it didn't go well?
Oh, most of the time. No, I mean, I was indomitable as a kid. I just, when you're on your own, you just learn to just plow your furrow, and fuck everything, excuse me, but fuck it to everything else.
So you were probably pretty brave and had a lot of gumption. Were you that scared of that many things or?
No, not really. It was a needs must situation. If you lose both your parents and you're in a situation where you don't know. My brother, what my brother did was and I think my brother was more badly affected by it than I was, actually, in truth. But they all worried about me because I was the youngest. But my brother was 16, and he was in a much more vulnerable age than I was at the age of 8. He was really, and he was very, even though he's not an emotional person, but he was very. My sister describes him eating an orange at the funeral of my father, and he was crying, but he was eating this orange to cover up the fact he was crying, and he was kind of apparently peeling this orange in his tears. And my brother wasn't an emotional person at all, but he was obviously very, very pained by the death of my father. And I think they didn't give him. I think he then he ran away and joined the army, which he didn't have to do. He could have been excused. We had conscription in those days. They were conscripted because we did that after the war. We had it. And then when I was getting to the age, they stopped it, so I didn't do any of that. I never went into the army. But my brother was in there. He found the army saved him because it took him away from his home and away from the tragedy of his house.
Hmm.
But he still lost out, and I think we underestimated how much he lost. I mean, I look upon that now. I look back on that now, but I didn't at the time. He was my brother, and he was always a nuisance, like older brothers are. But no,
So you
sad.
really, when I think about it, I mean, you really did. You were alone. Like
Yeah, yeah,
everyone was gone.
yeah. Everyone was gone, and I was there. I'd go around to my sister's, and I'd spend a couple of days. I'd sleep with my 2 nephews, but they had a tiny apartment. I mean, I had a
Right.
bigger apartment. I mean, because there was nobody in it. My sisters had gone, so we had 2 bedrooms and big living room kitchen, which we had, and a big, so I was on my, I was fine. But my sister, Betty, she lived in 2 rooms with a toilet on the stairs that was shared with 5 families. That was the kind of background that I came from. And
Well,
she was amazing. She did incredible work. She was wonderful, my sister. I miss her still. But she was like the rock, my elder sister Betty. She was the one that she just I knew I was going to be okay as long as I had that sister. And she was wonderful. She really was wonderful for me.
and did you learn how to cook then by yourself?
No, I used to make salads. I go into salads because I wasn't a cooker, but I used to love French toast. I was a great one for making French toast, getting lots of eggs, and whipping them up, and dipping bread, and then putting them on. I used to love French toast. So I, used
do you
to make-
still make good French toast, do you
I
think?
haven't made it for a long time, but I used to make it, then when I was a kid.
What's your favorite breakfast now?
Well, I'm diabetic, so I have to be very careful with my breakfast. So my
Mm.
favorite breakfast is I've actually gone off eggs. I used to eat a lot of eggs, but I can't face eggs anymore for some unknown reason. I'm not good. But I'm also on a thing called Ozempic, which is a thing that diabetics get. I mean, people have been using it for losing weight and stuff like that, which is terrible, actually. It's not a misuse of the drug because the drug is about dealing with your blood sugar. And it's helped me enormously. Yeah,
So
enormously.
then, what does breakfast look like? Can you have, like, it does have to be very plain or?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I might have some yogurt and some granola, or I would, or a protein breakfast, of bacon, something like bacon, and not even much bread, but it's just the bacon itself. Yeah.
Well, bacon's not too bad.
No, bacon and mushrooms and stuff like that. But I have to avoid now any starches, any carbohydrates. So I look at a carbohydrate, my blood sugar immediately goes way up high.
So what I was gonna ask you, when you're not acting, because I know you're doing that a ton, which honestly really I hope when I'm older that I'm as active and doing that much stuff because just being young, I'm tired all the time, so it's really hard to imagine. But I was gonna say, um, is there something you like to do outside of acting that you find, restful? Like if you had a day off.
Well,
Uh,
my thing is learn to do nothing. Human beings don't know how to do nothing because their brains take over and they start imagining all kinds of things. And my thing is just don't go into any of it. Just do nothing. Be in a room. Be in that room for a number of days without having to go out. I mean, I find that more. And also, the only time I go out is I work out. So I will go to the gym, and I like that. I like working out. But the thing is, and people don't know it. They don't know how to learn to do nothing. So allow your body just to take the rest and allow everything in to go on.
is that what you do? You sit in a room and
I sit in the
just
room, I mean, watch the tube or read but just do nothing. And especially my life, which is so hectic, and I'm off here, I'm there. I mean, like this last few days, it's just I mean, I've been in New Zealand, I've been in Paris, I've been in Costa Rica, I've been all over the bloody world, in New York and back in London doing the play. And I do a lot of traveling. My air miles are pretty incredible, but at the same time, I just when I know when I and I if it gets on top of me, I just don't do anything. I just stop, and I might go to the gym, which I quite like, but mainly I do nothing.
what's your favorite book when you mentioned reading?
Uh well, I mean, I read different things. I mean, I've read sort of. I mean, I suppose my favorite book is Wuthering Heights. It's a book I
I
love.
love that book, yeah.
Emily Bronte. I love the Brontes. They're just amazing. Those incredible sisters.
You like Jane Eyre?
I love Jane Eyre. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love Jane Eyre. Yeah, I do absolutely. So I love that. And then there are sort of, in terms of my life or life lessons, I there's a book called there was a guy, amazing Armenian Russian guy called Gurdjieff. And I became a follower of his for a while. I don't follow things normally, but I followed him because he talks brilliantly. And there is this book called In Search of the Miraculous, which was written by a guy called Pyotr Uspensky, and it's about how we attach ourselves to things, how we, you know, and also the other person who touches on it as well, and
Hmm.
who created logotherapy was oh God, the man who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. And he was a doctor, he was a psychiatrist who was in the camps during at the time of the concentration camps. He was a local, and he had this thing where he could see people, and he could tell the ones who were doomed. I mean, he would meet them, he would kind of examine them when they came into the concentration camp,
Hmm.
and he said, and he could actually say that person will die and that person will not die because of something in the individual, this sort of will to live, and also to define yourself in a way that you're not going to be put into that bracket. And it was astonishing. He did that. That was what he did.
Hmm.
So he wrote this book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is a wonderful book, absolutely wonderful book. Which is about his journey and about his journey as a psychiatrist, dealing with the people who were in the camps who were going to die. But he could tell. He said, "She'll live, she won't. He'll
Wow.
live, he won't." He could do that. An extraordinary gift.
I've got to read that. Did that,
Yeah.
in your own lifetime, since I mean, you've lived longer than me and you've experienced more, have you come to conclusions of your own on what life means?
I think one of the things I think that we don't quite understand is where we are in the state of. I don't believe in God. I simply don't believe in God. I believe that's a contrived belief system that people have. That's why I think the theatre is the real church, because it's about all of that and it's about human beings dealing with. But I don't. I think what we've never done is we've never really understand. We haven't really understood where we are in our own state of evolution, what we've evolved to, because we're so busy fucking ourselves up that we haven't actually sat down and thought, well, where am I? What is it? What is it about being a human being? Why is it we are human beings? What is it? Why is it we have all this stuff that we've got? And
Yeah.
and I realized that we've just not investigated it enough. We've never taken it into account. We don't really focus on it in a way. And therefore, we're not evolved. We're simply not evolved. And when you have an idiot like Trump, clearly we're not evolved, And clearly the fact that a lot of people believe in this man, you go, you know, it's so obvious that the man's a crook. It's so obvious he's a liar. But there are all these people who say, "Oh no, I like Trump because," and it's usually about greed. It's usually about human greed, and that's the big weakness for human beings is greed. Don't be greedy. Realize that life is a great gift that you've got, and we don't honor the gift of life. We just don't. Most people don't honor that. They're so busy kind of trying to obfuscate it or do something or get some profit out of it. It's just to be alive and understand what it is to be alive and understand the beauty of it, the excitement of it, the stuff that you get. And then you look at the paintings and people around you and the creations that you can get. But we don't do any of that. We don't really concern ourselves about our own evolution. Where are we? Where are we in this great scheme of things? And
What do
I,
you think would be ideal for people to be at?
well, it's very hard because I think religion has hijacked so much. And so you've got, you look at, for instance, you look at what's going on in Israel at the moment, and you realize that the Israelis and the Palestinians are the same people. The Jews used to inhabit, the difference between them is the Jews inhabited the whole of, the southern part of Saudi Arabia used to be fertile, and it's where the Jews originally came from. Now, the difference between Jews and the Bedouins, for instance, the Bedouins believed that the Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula was all to be, you traveled, you were nomadic, you went
Right.
through, that was the Bedouin sensibility. And of course, the Jewish, and they were, of course, they were Jewish, but they believed in settling. They created homes. They wanted to do that, and then they were kicked out and sent to Egypt, and then Moses brought them across, and all of that. The whole story. But it was a fascinating thing because it's just understanding the journey of a group of people and how it comes from being settlers to nomads, and the difference between being a settler and a nomad. The nomads meant you were free, the land was free, you didn't own it. But the
Right.
Jews are the ones who started to think, no, I'm going to settle. I need this space. I need to know who I am. And that's understandable. I have got nothing against that. But the downside is, where we are now, because of this sort of the confliction of the cultures, of the Arab culture and the Islamic culture and the Judaic culture. But then
Yeah.
you have to remember that Muhammad was a Jew. He was a Jew. That's where he came from. His dissatisfaction came from his Judaism that moved towards Islam. But I just find all of that a kind of distraction, really. It's where man gets led up a kind of garden path about religion, and you go, that's not serving you. It's a much more wider, much more mystical thing, truly mystical, not sort of fake mystical. Understanding who we are and why we're here.
Yeah.
You know, the purpose of what we are.
Well, it sounds to me like, especially when you mention that the theater to you is like the real church, is that
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
you
I
really
think
see it as you would love if more people were just unified and not divided by these differences of religion or
that's
politics
right,
or if it's
and it's a kind of nonsense because we're all the same. We're the same no matter where you're from. We're the same, but we have these customs and things that are wonderful in one sense, but they kind of define us in a way that we're not definable. We don't understand. We don't accept that we aren't. We haven't. We're not definable because we haven't got there. We're still traveling. We're still on the road. You know. And of course, we're all wanting to make sure that things are going to work out 1, 2, 3. That one and one will make two, and two and two women, and it's a sort of waste of energy, really. When you think about it.
yeah.
Whereas if we could just accept who we are and where we are in our own state of evolution, I think we'd be much better off.
Well, I wanted to ask you because you mentioned that you were Catholic. Well, at least your family was. How did you come away from Catholicism to like there is no God at all, which is very different?
Well, I think that the thing was that what I love, because I'm an actor, I love ritual. So the ritual always, I love the ritual of the church. I love the Angelus. I love, before John the 23rd introduced the Second Vatican Council. I love that freedom and the fact that, in a way, the liturgical Latin was the universal language for Catholics. And
Yeah,
then what John did, because he realized there were certain problems with it, because it made class distinctions. So that's why he said, he finally said, well, everybody should practice in their own language. So there wasn't. They got rid of the Latin liturgy, but I suppose the one thing about the Latin liturgy is it gave a universality. It kind of brought people together. But that is the problem, and that is the problem where you get down to it, where you go, oh, you've got to define yourself,
I see.
and that makes it difficult.
So for you, was it like maybe your teenage years where you were like, I don't like this?
I just grew out of it. I grew out. It was just I could see the fallacy of it. I just thought, no, it's not right. But I feel that about all religions. And I
Yeah,
and I think so much trouble that we've created in the world is because of the different religions. Oh, I'm this person that, and you go, no, you're not this, you're that. We're all the same,
right.
and it's that difficulty thing to accept that similarity.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
Brian, I want to ask just one last question. What play or book, um, film, however you want to think of it, do you think really personifies well humanity? Because, for me, I've always found and Shakespeare to be, which is one reason why I was so excited to talk with you, is Shakespeare for me, I feel like dives into so many aspects of being
Well, I
human.
think Shakespeare is it. You see, I think Shakespeare is it because Shakespeare really asked the big questions, and he's asked the big questions, 600 years ago, 500 years ago. And I think we haven't got beyond that in a sense. No, he's the man as far as I'm concerned. I mean, not the man, but he's the voice. He is the voice. And Shakespeare, there's so much. And as I get older, I begin to understand more of Shakespeare and begin to see what incredible clarity, but also seeking. Oh, hello. What's that?
Yes. It is my cat.
Oh, hi. Oh, it's lovely.
Thank
We have
you.
we have
He
three cats at home
he
in New York.
his name is Knightley, so after Jane Austen, the books.
Oh, all right, 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 right.
But he gets impatient, and he's like, I want attention.
Yeah, well, they do need attention. They do need attention.
But Brian, I'm so grateful for our time and thank you so much for
My
talking with
pleasure.
me.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And
So,
I
I misunderstood you. So, are you still a student, or are you? What are you? Are you studying, or what?
I am actually a legal assistant, but I have been out of college now for about 3 years.
All right.
But
Where did you go to college?
I went to a small college in Virginia, actually.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so I loved talking to people, and my major was journalism.
All right.
But I wasn't interested in news. I didn't like covering news. I didn't, it wasn't personable for me, and you didn't get to know people. It was just like, you have this deadline, you need to have this, and then there
Yeah.
wasn't enough time to
Yeah.
dive into people's true stories. Because right now, how fast media goes, you get things out, but then the next day they go, actually, never mind, that's not really how the story went. It's actually different because there's not enough time to look into it and to wait. So I
We
just
also
really
and we
wanted,
also rush. We also rush ourselves.
yeah,
We don't actually have enough. We don't take the time to focus and go and
exactly,
find our still center. Yeah.
exactly. And so I wanted to be able to start something on my own where I could talk with
That's
people
great. That's great.
and, get to know people and let them share their story in a space that was safe and comfortable for them. So.
Yeah, that's good. Well done.
Well, I hope you bring this play that you're in to America, maybe. It sounds so interesting.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well,
I've got
good
to
luck
learn it again.
being Bach.
I will.
All
It's
right.
lovely to meet you, Danielle. Lovely to meet you. Take
You
care.
too. Bye.